Welcome back to the show, Disruptors. I'm your host, Aaron Hale, and this is Point of Impact. Today, I want to tell you about maybe the most important thing I've learned in my entire life. The number one lesson I've learned about personal growth, success, about accomplishing everything I want in my life, both personally and professionally. Want to hear the secret? The number one thing that you need to do to accomplish anything in this world, to be successful at anything you set your mind to. You ready for that secret? I'm going to tell you. Here it comes. The number one thing you need to accomplish anything and be successful in this world is to just never quit. That's right. Just don't quit. I know, it sounds silly. It sounds stupid even from coming out of my mouth because it's so simple. But it's true. Like Sir Winston Churchill said, never quit. Never, 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 never quit. Yes, I had to try the British accent. But it's absolutely true. We are so good as humans to let ourselves off the hook. We're so good at it. We're good at cutting ourselves slack, making excuses, telling ourselves lies. Nobody in this entire world, in my entire life, has lied to me more than me. We are very creative storytellers when we feel we need to be. And we can tell ourselves some doozies. If you know you are on the right path and you hit that wall, that internal voice starts talking to you. It starts making you doubt that you're doing the right thing, that you're actually on that right path. And how do you know you're on the right path? Well, this is something you need to figure out before you hit that wall. And how do we have the right path, and we're setting the right goals, and that we're doing the right thing? That starts with your values. We create a vision of what we want the future to look like, who we want to be, who we want to become, what we want to look like, how healthy we are, how fit, what kind of adventures we want to have, what kind of relationships we want with our God, with our parents, our spouse, our kids. What kind of husband, wife, son, daughter, mother, father do we want to be? What kind of friend? What kind of relationships do we want with our neighbors and our coworkers? What kind of occupation? What kind of work do we want that fulfills us and provides for our families and creates the freedom to do those adventures, to have the time to spend with all these people? That's our vision, and that's what you got to create. And it's based on your values, what you hold most dear, most important in this world, and it's based off of those things. And from those values, you can create the vision. And from the vision, you can start making goals. And from goals, you can create a plan. You start working the plan. And that's when you know you're on the right path, because you work in the plan that gets you to the goals, which help you achieve that vision. And then when life inevitably gets difficult and you run against some challenges and you start telling yourself those stories, right? You start to be pragmatic. I'm just being realistic, right? And that voice says, starts rationalizing, telling yourself rational lies. All you got to do is base your decisions against your values and your goals. And any decision you make that takes you further away from those goals is the wrong decision. Anything that takes you closer to your goals, that's what you must do, no matter how difficult. And I'm not talking about not quitting as in when you're simply doing the wrong thing. It doesn't, when what you're doing you find doesn't work. That's just being, efficient. That's just being aware. Assess the situation and find out that no matter how hard you work, that's not going to work. And that's not going to get you any closer. And that's when you reassess and you reformulate and you work a better plan. And your goals and your values can change over time. You are not, a statue. You're not static. What I wanted, I felt was most important, my values when I was 20 are definitely different than when I was 30, or different than when I was 40. We change, we grow, we learn, and our values change. And over time, my values became less internal and more external. I became more about accumulation and more about service, and less about me and more about my family, my relationships. That's different than what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about is when you know you're on the right path, but things get hard and we start talking to ourselves and we start telling ourselves and we start finding those excuses. We start saying, maybe we're not on the right path, even though we know we are. And maybe our efforts could be better served in a different capacity, doing something that might be, I don't know, maybe a little less hard, maybe a little more comfortable, something we're used to and has worked in the past. I know. I'm telling you, I've started more plans and ended them abruptly to start other plans. It's like trying to build a bridge from who you are and where you are today across this vast expanse, this huge sea of the unknown, to the opposite shore, where you want to go and who you want to be. And in between, in this sea, it's rough. It's rough waters and heavy winds and sharks and all sorts of dangers, but you are full of enthusiasm and energy and you start building that bridge and you get going. And at first you're flying, you're building, and it's no problems, but then you start getting into the unknown. It starts becoming a little scary. You start feeling the fear. You start feeling the fatigue of the building. And then that's when you start saying, maybe this bridge isn't the right kind of bridge. So you quit. You stop that bridge. And you start another plan, a different goal, a different bridge, and you start building again. I must have 100 different half-built bridges and never gotten to the other side, never gotten any closer. I'll tell you a story about it's almost 20 years ago. The thing I wanted most in this world was to become an explosive ordnance disposal technician. EOD, the military's bomb squad. Everything about it was in line with my values. It was an adventure. It was dangerous, and I wasn't afraid of danger. And I wanted the adventure. It was exciting. And I would be among the elite, the 1% of the 1%, doing one of the world's most dangerous jobs. For a young guy in his 20s, that was a very exciting time. It was an exciting prospect, and I wanted it. Plus, I'd be in service to my brothers and sisters on the battlefield, saving lives, and I'd be in service of my country. It was also a very demanding and technical and challenging job, mentally and physically tough. And I wanted to be an EOD tech because of all of those things. So I had my values and I had that vision. And I set the goals, the number one goal being to get through the EOD school. Phase one being at Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. And my first challenge was literally a test, the bomb suit test. That bomb suit is about 90 pounds of Kevlar and ceramic plate. You'd have to take a test, being physically and mentally exhausted, and tested on how you are able to handle yourself inside that suit, not just on a physical fitness level, but on a mental acuity level. So I remember it so distinctly, so vividly. I showed up at the schoolhouse to take my bomb suit test. I met the instructor at the time, even though it was a brand new to the school. I was a sergeant, and I met the instructor, sergeant first class, and he was kind enough, he was nice enough, but he kept a pretty placid pace. He was serious, and he said, "Follow me." And we went up to the second floor of the schoolhouse and into an empty classroom, mostly storage, and there was a suit right there, and we started putting it on. The heavy pants and the heavy jacket. Then he put the helmet on top, and I was almost completely enrobed in this cocoon. And then he picked up the plexiglass face shield, the mask. It's inches thick. He said, "Once I put this mask on, your time starts. You can take the helmet off and the mask off anytime you want, but then the test is over and you will have failed." I nodded my understanding and my acceptance, and he also pointed down to my side and said, "Once we put the mask on and the time starts, I want you to pick that up." And I looked down there and saw it was a 155 millimeter howitzer round, fully filled with high explosives and fused. It's about 80, 90 pounds. So it's a little bit light without those, since it's a training aid in a schoolhouse. But it was still just one huge hunk of steel. So he put the mask on and looked at his watch for the first time, which would of many during this test. And then he looked at me and kind of nodded down to the 155 round. So I picked that thing up and I did what any smart guy would do. I started to heft it up onto my shoulder. He said, "No, you have to cradle that in your arms like a baby." And he demonstrated by bending his elbows at a 90-degree angle with his palms up and his fingers kind of curled toward the ceiling. He said, "Like this." And that's when I went from understanding that it would be a tough test to knowing this was going to be a crucible. And within a few seconds, I could already start to feel the burn. Between the bomb suit and this 155 round, I went from 185 pounds or so to around 335 pounds. The instructor just said, "Follow me." And he opened up the classroom door for me and we walked out. And I followed him as we walked down the hall. He opened up the fire doors to the stairwell and he said, "All right, head on downstairs. Be careful. I don't want you to drop something and break anything, like the stairs." I knew he was joking, but he still maintained a straight face. So maybe not. He went from standing in front of me to going around behind me, just in case 335 pounds of Kevlar human and iron came crashing down the stairs. He said it was because there was a drag handle up by the collar of the suit, and if I started to topple over, he could help right me. But if I started to topple over, I think we were all going to go. So slowly and steadily, I took each step one by one, and each step I felt the thud of all that weight go right into my biceps. But I went all the way down the stairs, and by the time we walked out to the first floor, to the ground floor, I was already sweating. We walked down the hall towards the back door of the schoolhouse and out towards the parking lot. And instantly, as soon as I stepped out into that mid-morning in Huntsville, Alabama, northern Alabama, the heat hit me through the bump suit and instantly fogged my mask that was cooled by the air conditioning inside, and just reminded me of how much I already miss the air conditioning. And of course, my hands were a bit tied up at the time, and I couldn't unfog, wipe down my mask. So the instructor had a little mercy on me. He didn't let me put the brown down, but he reached up under my mask and wiped it himself. Actually, he just kind of smeared it around. It didn't do much good, but then he said, "All right, do not set that round down. If you set that you set that bullet down, the test is over and you fail. It cannot touch the ground. Follow me." And at a leisurely pace for him, we walked around, did a couple laps around the parking lot, and every once in a while, he would stop so I could do a couple squats. And then in between random calisthenics, he would pull out some change and have me count the change and tell me how much he had in his pocket. And then he'd put the change back in his pocket and we'd keep going. I'd do a little more calisthenics, all the while my arms burning more and more. And I tried to do some kind of a limbo thing where the round was sitting more on my chest than my arms, but it didn't work very well. And we kept moving. And then we would stop and he pulled out a magazine. He'd show me the magazine, then open it up to a dog-eared page, and he'd have me read the article and let him know when I was done. And then we'd keep walking. And then he'd point to a license plate on a car in the parking lot, and he'd say, "Read that out loud," and then read it again. And then we'd keep walking, do more calisthenics, and the arms and the biceps and the forearms would just keep burning. And then it would start inching down a little bit. So it was in the, less on my biceps and more in the crook of my elbows. And soon I was huffing and puffing. And anybody who's worn that suit knows that inside the helmet there's a fan. So it wasn't, but the fan is kind of a joke because it doesn't circulate that carbon dioxide as fast as I'm putting it out and replenishing it with oxygen. So it felt like I was suffocating. And I kept walking. And I was starting to sweat. And I'm not talking sweat. It was like I just stepped out of a pool. I was drenched already. How much longer? How long has it been? He wouldn't tell me. And we kept, well, I wouldn't ask. And we kept walking, calisthenics. Then he would turn around and say, what were the last 3 digits on that license plate? Or he would ask, who wrote that article? What was the name of the magazine? What was it about? How many quarters did I have in my pocket? This is where that mental acuity came in. I would have to recall under duress, mental and physical fatigue. I'd have to be able to stay sharp. And he would look at his watch from time to time and then say, keep going. And we would do this calisthenic or that, and more squats, maybe a little run in place. And I just kept getting more and more fatigued. And then finally, when he, I don't know if it was the right time or if he just saw the pleading in my eyes, I knew I've never been in a bomb suit. I've never experienced this before, and I wasn't quite sure how much longer I would last. It probably wouldn't be much. And he said, wait right here. And he walked about 50 yards away. And he said, all right, Sergeant Hale, come meet me over here. And I looked at that distance, 50 yards, 50 miles. It could have been either. I don't know if I could have made it. But I started walking. And that 155 round, it started rolling inch by inch. It would start sagging down my arm as my arms began to fail me. And within about 10 feet, they were already down on my forearms. And another 5 feet, they were on my wrist. It was down by my wrist. And you imagine about 60 or 65 pounds just resting on your wrists, trying to walk like that. So I crouched a little bit and let it rest on my thigh. As I swung one hand, I took the risk of swinging one hand around from the backside of the 155 to the front side. And I'd have it by both sides. But I could not get this hunk of steel, this hunk of iron, back up on my arms. So it kind of just stayed there on my thigh. And then it was like I was anchored. What was I supposed to do now? Each time I tried to shuffle or move, it would scoot a little bit more down my thigh. I made it about 5 feet before it was resting precariously right on my knee. My fingers now beginning to burn like everything else. My arms practically useless now, just keeping it on my knee. I looked up and the instructor looked at his watch. And he looked back at me. I would not quit. This was in line with my values, and I was going to keep going. I didn't know how. Everything in my mind was screaming, drop the thing. I tried hefting it back up towards my thigh. There was no dream, no chance whatsoever that I could get it back up, cradled on my arms again. That was long gone. And I moved, and the thing slid right over my knee. And before it could go to the ground, I somehow successfully guided it upright to my toes, and it landed on my foot. Thankfully, I'd slowed it enough that it didn't crush my foot. But there it was, sitting on my foot, pinning me. It just pinned me to that tarmac, that blacktop in that parking lot. My arms were gone. And I was exhausted. I was out of breath. I was sweating. My mouth was so dry and sticky, and my mind was gone. I couldn't think anymore. The one thing I knew is that I had to keep moving forward. I tried futilely to try picking it up some way, but all that sweat running down my fingers, I just slid along that howitzer round. I was going nowhere. I looked up again and again. The instructor looked at his watch, then he looked at me. This time he said, "Sergeant Hale, put it down. The test is over." I wouldn't answer him, and I tried picking it up again. No way. In my mind, I was screaming. I was desperate. I tried again, and it moved, and I shuffled another inch, and he said again, "Sergeant Hale, put the 155 down. The test is over." And I yelled, "No, no, I can do it." And I tried again. I looked down at this round and I tried with everything I had. But I couldn't move it. I couldn't move my foot. I couldn't move this hunk of iron. I don't know if it was sweat rolling down the sides of my eyes or tears. It was probably both. That's when I looked up and the instructor was right in front of me. He said, "Sergeant Hale, you don't understand. You can put the round down now. You passed. All I wanted to see was that you wouldn't quit. The other things were important. You needed to be in shape. You needed to keep your head about you. Of course, I'd gotten some of the questions wrong, and I could probably stand to be more fit like anybody else. But the most important thing to him was that when things got tough, I wouldn't quit. I was welcomed into the schoolhouse and eventually became an EOD technician. I got to put that crab, the blaster's badge on my chest. What goals do you have? What vision do you have for your future? What stories are you telling yourself that are keeping you from accomplishing your goals and getting you towards your success? I'll leave you with this thought. Everything you want in this world is just one step beyond what you think you can accomplish. When you think you're completely spent, if you can do one more, you'll find your success. So don't quit. I know you got it in you. And I'll ask you for a quick favor before we go on. Somewhere in your circle, someone you know is telling themselves lies right now. Someone needs the right message. If you would, please do what all smart, thoughtful, and frankly, good-looking listeners would do. And give the show a 5 stars, give a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube, comment, share, leave a review, and tell others about the show. Beyond that, take the show link and text it to somebody you think would appreciate this podcast. Somebody's looking for a little motivation. Someone's looking for just the right message. Hopefully this is the one, because I want to help you and them out. Together, we can accomplish anything we want in this world. I'll get it after it and go make an impact.